right, seeing a couple other people coming in. Welcome all. Welcome in, and I think we're going to get running with our content because we've only got an hour. So welcome to those who just joined. I'm Sally Bell. I help run the office here in Southern Willamette Valley for TAO. I'm the VP and Executive Director, if we haven't had the chance to meet yet. I have the privilege of introducing our midday program for impact on economic competitiveness. Today, we're also joined by Riley O'Brien, my colleague, who's Vice President of Events and Experiences at TAO. Should you have any questions or issues during the webinar, feel free to send her a private note through the TAO admin profile. You're also welcome to message me as well. We're just going to go over our spiel here for a few rules of engagement before we start. And all participants have been muted. If you prefer, you may ask or respond to questions in the chat box publicly or privately by directing your messages to us. We'll monitor that chat box and respond through the discussion. We ask that you also engage through the participant icon on your screen. Many of you know this drill on Zoom by now. So please engage with us on social media during this event and throughout the day. We certainly appreciate any chance you have to feature your engagement with us. We love to share what's happening at TAO and get participant takeaways from our events. And due to limited time, we will capture all questions in the chat, and any questions we don't get to, we'll make sure we get that answered on our platform, our online member engagement platform called Mobilize. If you haven't had a chance to join yet, we welcome you to the Mobilize party. It's TAO's member-only virtual community, and our guests today will provide written responses to any unanswered questions, so that will be located there. And if you have any specific questions about Mobilize, contact us. Or any questions about joining TAO in general, please reach out to membership@techoregon.org. So next, we want to make a thank you and shout out to our generous sponsors, JLL and Facebook, for underwriting this awesome series. We so appreciate your support and sponsorship, and you've been just amazing partners. We also invite you to join us later today. This has been an all-day event. There was something earlier this morning, and we've got this lunchtime panel. And then later today at 4 p.m., we have a Q&A with regional economic development partners, which is going to be a really excellent conversation. So join us later in the afternoon. So now, without further ado, and the reason we're all here, it's my pleasure to welcome our moderator and impact presenting sponsor, Eric Turner, who's the managing director of JLL. So I'm going to give it to you, Eric. Just take it away.
Well, great. Well, thank you, and welcome everybody. So this is part of the Impact series that we are proud to sponsor. As Sally mentioned, we were excited about this just because coming out of the crisis, I think we as a region and as a community need to come together and move our business forward and move kind of the community forward. So we were excited to partner with Skip and the TAO team as they introduced the Impact series as something we could be involved with. So we're happy to do that. And today we are going to hear from the service provider community. And so I will introduce our panelists today. We have Tracy Vicario. I hope I said that right. Did I get that right, Tracy?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Tracy is VP of Business Development with Hub International. Tracy, can you say a couple of words about yourself and further the introduction, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I work with employers on their strategic benefit planning and retention, recruitment ideas, and compliance, and really helping them maintain, the technology companies maintain that employer of choice. And I'm excited to be on the panel today to share how healthcare and benefits, the industry is changing, and share some ideas to help you stay competitive. So thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tracy. And you're active member in I think the Pearl District Business Association and the Pearl District Rotary, so a Portlander and active in our community. So thank you. Next would be Tony Seminary, CEO of IT Motives. Tony, you're University of Oregon alumni, I see that, and outdoor enthusiasts, so I'm sure we would get along just fine. Go Ducks and and all of that. But Tony, can you introduce yourself and the company, please?
Sure. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Riley, for the opportunity to be on this panel. My name is Tony Seminary. I'm the founder and CEO of IT Motives. We are a technical recruiting company. We're based in Portland. We do our searches on both a retained and contingent basis. I'm a lifelong Oregon resident, never lived anywhere else. As Eric said, I'm a Duck grad, and I do love the outdoors, and it's just great to be here.
Thanks, Tony. We appreciate you being on. And go Ducks. And I saw Sally say that in the chat box too. And sorry, Dan, because I know that I think you're Oregon State. Am I right about that?
I definitely wanted to make sure we differentiated a little bit here.
Well, Dan, welcome. Dan is the market manager for Bend Broadband. They're in Central Oregon and enjoying some nice sunshine today. Dan, can you introduce yourself and the company?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Yeah, Oregon State grad, was over on the Valley side for about the last 2 decades, and we moved over to Bend about a year ago. So I head up the commercial efforts here in Central Oregon, and this topic we're going to talk about has been squarely in the middle of our focus because we bring all that great bandwidth and internet connectivity to commercial and residential customers here in Central Oregon. So glad to be here and to see a lot of familiar faces from TAO. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dan. So my name is Eric Turner. As Sally mentioned, I'm the market leader for JLL in Portland. JLL is a commercial real estate firm. My practice is also squarely in the middle of what we're talking about, which is what does the future look like post-pandemic? How do we come out of this? What changes? And what changes for employees, for businesses as well. And so I'm constantly talking with CEOs and founders about how to re-enter the workplace and what to do with workforce, what changes are we all going to find moving out of this. So it's really interesting, and it'll be great to get your perspectives on what you're hearing from your customers as well. At the end of this, we'll have an opportunity for the audience to answer questions or to ask questions, excuse me, of anyone here. And so with that, last year, in a matter of weeks, as we all know, the world changed. And I think we're coming up on a year now, or we're just about there, which was a surprise to me. I don't know why, but I kind of figured we were going to be out, summertime of last year, but of course that didn't happen. And so as a result, we've all had to make some major changes in our lives, in our businesses. We've had to make investments in infrastructure and pave the way, I think, for our clients to be successful. So it was an incredible feat, one that's worth acknowledging for the business community. And so, Tony, when it comes to the hiring, onboarding, and it specifically, I would say, excuse me, performance management of these employees, how does it change moving forward when we're looking at more of a remote workforce, or at least some degree of remote workforce moving forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. Hiring has definitely changed from the standpoint that people can work. A lot of companies have taken the stance that you can be remote, you can work wherever you live, and you don't have to be, quote unquote, on site 5 days a week in the office because of the pandemic, obviously. And there are clients that will continue on with that, and there will be some clients that will say we would actually like to go back to the 5 days a week, believe it or not. And so with that, it is a real important thing to get your hiring right at any time you're hiring, but I think even more so in this age because of you just don't have the opportunity like you do when you're in the office to have that kind of water cooler talk. The onboarding has to be pretty crisp. It has to be dialed in. I think you have to set the tone really quickly with your new employee of, we're ready for you, and that we are organized and we kind of have our stuff together, really. And I think it's a real important thing. And then, performance management, I don't think it's probably changed a whole lot in my opinion. And the reason I say that, Eric, is because it is in technology, especially, it's a bit easier to know if someone's performing or if they're not. I'd even argue maybe in other industries as well, but definitely in technology, especially if you're a software developer, let's say, as far as number of commits and things of that nature. So I do think that hiring has changed, and I think the onboarding though is probably one of the bigger things, because some companies, needed to improve in that, and this was an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, are you seeing the geographies start to break down in terms of where people are hiring?
As far as like, could you explain?
So, I mean, for us, at least on the real estate side, people make decisions based on where talent is located primarily and catering to that talent. Are you seeing the, call it, geographies of where you can hire start to break down a little bit, or are people still pretty much focused on the market that they serve physically?
Probably a little bit of both. I know for us, we have had to go out and expand our own networks to find the talent. Before the pandemic hit, the talent for technology professionals in Portland was like, you could probably say it was close to 1% unemployment rate. And with the pandemic, there was a little bit of a dip in March and April, but the tech market really didn't get impacted that much, thankfully. And so the market has come roaring back now, and some of those same positions are still unfilled. So you're still trying to mine the talent locally, but yeah, you can now open it up quite a bit. The rub will be sometimes if you go into certain markets, let's say like Bay Area or Seattle, or markets that pay higher, it might be harder to attract those kinds of candidates because they're used to getting a certain kind of wage, versus if you're going to maybe some other markets that pay kind of more in line with the Portland kind of wages. So I think it just kind of depends, but it definitely now has expanded where for talent acquisition, we're kind of expected to go and find those candidates wherever they might be.
Thank you. So Tracy, on the benefit side, if you're talking about companies in Oregon, California, Washington, maybe wherever, how does that impact the benefits packages that employees are looking to secure, and how do you manage that?
So we're pretty fortunate in that from a core benefit perspective, the healthcare, we have 8 medical carriers here, and they all have national networks, and some are more prominent than others. And smaller healthcare companies like Providence, which is localized here, are building out broader networks that are more a national network that is more recognizable. So it's something that's been around for a long time, national, certainly on the national level. But our team built something called persona analysis, where we're taking a deeper dive into analyzing populations. So from a benefit perspective, you can't just say from a technology company, what is Google doing? Let's all do what Google's doing. But we're looking at putting the US Census data and your employee population together, and with age, gender, and tenure of how long they've been there, to really identify what's most important. And a couple things are coming up. Number one, because of that, the number one valued benefit is career development. So career development, not so much as watching these videos to get information or to have a mentor, but more like the executive coach, but not calling it executive coach anymore. But how can I manage, and where is my advancement going? And then number two is that benefit package. So employers are putting in more employee assistance programs, dealing with anxiety and tension, and helping employees with those issues that Tony talked about. You don't have at the water cooler anymore. So, people are internalizing. So how you can help them with that. Compensation tends to be, third, and then employee recognition. I think if you've got employees all over, and how are you managing them and really recognizing them? So making that more of a benefit, a peer-to-peer. And then in talking to our capital consulting team, we're learning that you have to look within. So because we can't just mirror what is the technology company doing across the street, analyzing your employees and determining your top performers and what's important to them, and then really putting matrix around it. How are you going to measure what's working and what's not, and building those programs that meet specific to your mission, vision, values, or your B Corp, or really that culture of the organization.
That's great. Dan, how about you? So we've seen a major, excuse me, shift to what I've heard is called Zoom towns, and people being able to work from anywhere, and that puts a strain on, I would think, on bandwidth and having the technology. So how are you making sure that all employees, regardless of location, have access to high-speed internet?
Yeah, it's a great question. When you think about the pivot a year ago, it was like the ultimate snow day, right? We're all working from home, we're all schooling from home, and so it was a great stress test on the networks that are out there. The cool thing is that when you look at the heritage of where we started, we're a cable company. We started providing residential TV signal to the homes, and then we expanded our networks into the urban core. So now with this pandemic challenging IT professionals, they're saying, okay, we're going to push our employees to their home base work, and we have the technology already in place to satisfy that. So it comes down to thinking about how do we standardize the requirement, how do we ensure that our employees have the same work experience at home as they do in the office. So it's raised a series of new questions. We all take it for granted when we walk into the office and we have dual monitors, and we have bandwidth that works, and technology that's secure. So I think the big challenge that we try to reinforce with our clients is to be thinking beyond just the bandwidth and saying, okay, how am I going to provide an experience to these applications that's secure, that's predictable, and is satisfying. And it really feeds back to some of the other topics that Tracy and Tony are talking about with employee satisfaction and the ability to recruit top talent. You really have to have a technology platform that's viable for to be able to attract those types of people. So the looking back over the last year, I'd say we're very proud of the performance of our networks, and it's really proved in that we're kind of an essential service. And I fondly refer to our tech ops folks as the first responders of telecom, and they've just done a tremendous job of keeping the networks running. We've scaled extremely well, so it's been a great challenge to be a part of this year.
I'll tell you, first responders and a necessary service, right? I mean, during the snowstorm, I know you didn't get much out in Central Oregon, but boy, we were out for 6 days here, no connectivity, no power, even cell coverage. It was very hard to get cell phone coverage, and I heard it was because the cell towers actually lost power as well. So people were, completely dead in the water. We definitely appreciate and need the high-speed connectivity. One question I have just for the group here is around setting up a home office. And our research shows that, I think Tony had mentioned it, there will be some folks that want to be 5 days a week, some folks that want to be 5 days a week at home, and then the vast majority want to be in this sort of choice environment where you get to sort of choose where you work. And Dan mentioned the dual monitors, the high-speed connectivity. Are you seeing any sort of push from employers to provide resources for the employees at home so that they can so they're actually providing the monitors or the desks or the ergonomic chairs or paying for internet or anything along those lines from an enhanced kind of benefit in this new world paradigm that we're in?
I can take that one first. I definitely am seeing that. I think the the challenge is, how do you make yourself look like you're in a normal work mode when we've got people scattered, across the country, literally. And so I think there's definitely a technology story. So companies that have the ability to invest in technologies that will be flexible enough to allow them to change their presence and still look like they're in the office. So, some of the hosted products that we have deployed have worked nicely. We're a great use case in that we pivoted a Fortune 500 company in about 3 days to a work from home. And the enablement was the platform. We eat our own dog food, so to speak. So it's allowed us to gain some key learnings and apply those to how we help our customers.
We're finding that it's a little bit of both, right? It's a big cost. So the companies, personally, our organization did the same thing. We have 13,000 employees nationally, and you pivot overnight. But then how do you, from a cost perspective, get everybody set up in a location at home? So, Eric, as you see the shift in the commercial real estate side, will people be putting those workplaces by the wayside? Most of us just brought our workstations from the office home and set up at home. And I think we're enhancing a little bit over time. And you heard me say earlier, I guess before this started, that I look forward to when Zoom can come up with backgrounds that don't make us disappear or look funny, around our faces. So I think some are paying for it, but I don't think there's any going back. I think that people are used to this, and that we're going to be able to recruit and go from that talent pool, which could help and hinder you as a tech company. Because back to the benefit side, if you aren't listening to the employees about what they want, it's going to be really easy to work for somebody else remotely somewhere else, right? By not moving.
If I will, I think as an employer, you'll have to be flexible, Eric. I think you'll just have to, like, one thing that comes to mind is if you're paying for TriMet or something of that nature, you don't pay for that right now, right? But yet you've got to pay possibly for another monitor for them. So what will happen when the employee wants to come in 2 or 3 days a week, but they still need to take TriMet? Is the employer going to say, oh, well, you either get one or the other, or we'll give you half of each, half of a nice monitor, half of a TriMet pass? I doubt it, So I think companies just will have to be flexible. And really, as Tracy pointed out, really listen to their employees of what they are looking for and what they want. And keep in mind too, what's going to be interesting, none of us really know what will happen. So some of us might say right now, gosh, I don't ever want to go back to the office. And in a year, they might say, I want to come in half-time, or I want to come in full-time, maybe. Right? It could happen. So I don't know if we all know what that new normal will look like. So it's going to be a while probably before it shakes out, whenever COVID is over, whenever that is deemed as such.
Yeah, over. Or at least being able to kind of get back out. And it seems like there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Tracy, you made a comment that made me laugh, because we did the same thing at JLL. We took our monitors that we had at the office, our monitor stands, our docking stations, even chairs, if you could fit them in your car, kind of thing. And so now you go back and it's a complete boneyard. I mean, and we had to do an audit of all of the desks to see what tech remained, what we could cobble together, as we're starting to roll out this basically hot desking scenario where people are sharing desks and coming back, because we still have, at least as far as I'm aware, a 10-person maximum on indoor people that can be in a space at a time. And so we've been rotating people that are essential, like property managers and then brokers and stuff in, but it's a total boneyard. And so we know that when we come back in force, to some extent, there will be an investment in technology we'll have to make, or we'll have to put that on the employees and say, bring all the stuff back. And if you want a home office, you need to set that up, or we need to be prepared to compensate them for it in some way. And so it'll be interesting to see, how we all emerge out of this. But again, and the other thing, Tony, you mentioned about, we don't know where we're going to be. I totally agree with you. When we did our first surveys in the early days of COVID, there was a majority of people that were like, this is great. You know, I can work from home, you know, work-life balance is great. I can get everything I need to get done. And, you know, if you remember when we first started, it was sort of summertime, things were nice, like, you know, the work was slow. And now we redid that same survey and that number has dropped dramatically. So I think that things will continue to iterate over time and people will sort of change their mindset. So
remember we talked about flattening the curve around June, July. I mean, that was, wow. Seems like years ago, really.
It really does. It really does. Well, I mean, so you look at the COVID crisis compared to the financial crisis, compared to the .com crisis, and you start to think this could, you know, potentially be a much bigger financial impact, and it already has been. But in what ways do you think that technology companies could be tweaking their business models to ensure resiliency and competitiveness coming out of this? And this is open for anybody.
I'll go. A couple things. One is to get really focused on what it is you do well. I know that sounds really simple, but I think you do as a business sometimes tend to chase business that maybe you think you should be going after. And so a pandemic kind of has a way of having you recalibrate and saying, what are we really, really good at? And what should we be going after? I think also, you know, selling into different markets, going after maybe some enterprise clients. When you're selling your service or your goods, like salespeople, we always talk about this. The words we use is we want to get a big giant whale, right? That's the enterprise client, because if they are spending, let's say, 100 million a year in goods and services for technology, when a pandemic hits, they're going to spend 50, but they're still spending, right? If you've got a small client that's spending 1 million, when a pandemic hits, they may spend nothing. So I think like looking at some other opportunities to get in some larger enterprises that can help take you through some of those ups and downs of recessionary times. And I also think, I know that a lot of folks think of cutting costs, and that's the normal, natural thing. I own my own company as well, and I have employees. And of course, that was the first thing I thought of. I had a friend right when COVID hit, he's like, here's some marketing information about what not to do during a recession. And the thing they said was, of course, it was a marketing company, so they were a little self-serving, but they said, don't cut your marketing budget. Because when you come out the other side of it, you want people to know who you are during a pandemic. Like, you're not going under as a company, you're solvent, you're here for long term. And when the market does come back, they'll remember you and they're like, wow, that company was spending money. They look like they were successful. I want to be connected to them. I want to work with them. And so they really emphasize, don't cut your marketing costs. I know that does sound counterintuitive, but I think that's one thing that we did. We went out and spent about 5 figures on revamping our internal website at IT Motives during this pandemic. So I try to heed that advice. But those are some of the things just right off the top of my head that I would think of that a company or companies can be doing.
And Tony may be able to relate to this a little bit more, but you know, rather than looking at what specifically an employee has a job description and the skills that they need to fill a position, but I think there'll be some cost shifting in that the tech company is going to need to determine what is it now coming out of this, that what skills do we need as an organization, not just as a particular job, and looking at the skill set overall and then hiring for those skill sets, and whether that be across different state borders or locally. But I think that there could be some cost adjustments there. And then also looking at that overall benefit program and the reduction of or redundancies in benefits that you may not need. And oftentimes companies are overpaying and they don't need to be providing and offering certain things just based on what the employees are using, and going back to that data and analytics and understanding what is valued the most, and some of the things that you can shift the cost elsewhere.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. I think the timing is right to do, kind of an overall audit technologically. So how are we doing business today? What have we learned over the last year? Are there some adjustments we can make? And Tony, you mentioned the sales side of this equation, and it's certainly been an area of focus for us is how do we sell differently in this mode where we can't get face to face, and do we leverage different tactics with technology? Video prospecting, for example, is something that's come up, and I would encourage companies to really look through the lens of their customers and to try and anticipate and be empathetic. So we have a variety of different customers we serve. Some were hit harder than others in the pandemic, and so making adjustments in our policies to soften the edge on some of the impact for them was, I think, critical, and has helped serve the relationship down the road.
Yeah.
And Eric, you used this word earlier, infrastructure, and that financial investment in some of the infrastructure being, whether it's a standalone benefits administration or a full-blown HRIS system, but making that investment, I think, will be cost savings down the road. It might be easy for an employer to say, I'm going to hire this, employee in New York State, but New York State has all these paid family medical leave laws and disability laws that are different. And the only way to track and really understand some of this is with a sound infrastructure. So I think there is going to come from, technology companies will have to start thinking about that, making that major investment that will help them down the road.
Great points. Tony, I have a question for you. So I have two kids, 7 and 9. They're young enough, but they've been out of school for a year. And I keep hearing people joke about like the forgotten generation because, they're just staring at computers or not working or going to school at all. Do you think that, how do you think it impacts maybe the hiring market, or do you think it impacts the hiring market, the fact that we've had this jolt to the education system, whether it be higher education, high school, or younger? Do you foresee any impacts on that long term?
I don't know about long term, but I think short term, a lot of folks have just exited the workforce during this pandemic. I mean, that's just a fact. It's really hard to know what it'll be like longer term for not just the children like yours, your 7 and 9-year-old, but also the folks that are taking care of those children. And I think it is something that you're going to see in 6 to 9 months, maybe a year, resumes land on people's desks that have a gap year, right? Or longer. And so I think as employers, you're going to have to be open to those kinds of candidates that for no fault of their own had to take time off to care for, children and elderly and, even maybe even themselves if they got COVID as well. It was already a tight market going into the pandemic, as I mentioned earlier, and there was a little bit of a few layoffs in companies in March or April last year. But then, at least from a tech perspective, Eric, it's red hot right now, and we're still having a really hard time finding candidates.
Any suggestions for people who want to get training or enhance sort of their skills while in this time period?
Sure. A couple things you could do is you could, if you're a programmer, let's say, you could be creating an app around a passion of yours, right? It could be whatever that is: hiking, jogging, kayaking, what have you. You could definitely be doing things like on Coursera, We have, I don't know if they're a member company, but in Eugene, CBT Nuggets is a computer-based training company. So they have everything from software development to network engineers to systems engineers. You can go online and, get back up to speed on the modern technologies. You could take on an open source project with other people around the world, wherever they might be. So there's different ways you can use the technology to help close that gap that you might have in technology if you're off for a year or two. And in some parts of technology, if you're off for a year or two, that's actually quite a long time because the technology does change fairly rapidly. You could go to a boot camp just to kind of do a refresh. So there's different ways to kind of close those gaps if necessary.
Great. Well, so we've got about 20 minutes left. I want to make sure that we have some time for questions at the end, but just maybe for the group here, what are you hearing from your customers most often? What are the things that they are thinking about that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis? And maybe Tracy, we can start with you.
I think, well, it continues to change. Last year was fast and furious and laws changing, and, they needed compliance, and our communication and design team, and how are we going to communicate to the employees? So really understanding, furlough versus layoff, benefits on, off, how to deal with that. And as the dust is settling, I think it's more the technology of the communication piece. So we are doing a lot more with video education. So recording, rather, instead of face-to-face open enrollment and education, we're videotaping that so that they can use that information to take home and talk to their spouse and or partners about the benefits. So I think I spoke about it earlier, really looking at the infrastructure. Our technology team is working hard to help folks find those benefit administration systems and HRIS systems, and then compliance as that continues to shift. So we're doing little VIP chats and hand holding as it relates to some of these laws changing. And as I touched on, when employees are located in San Francisco or New York and they have completely different rules and laws, then the regulatory piece gets very complex. So they're leaning on us a lot more for that.
Thank you. Tony, how about you? Actually, let's go to Dan real quick. Dan, how about you? What are you hearing most from your customers, and how are you having to pivot to help serve them?
I think we're hearing a lot about how do you help us be flexible, so how do we anticipate changes that are happening rapidly and maybe coming back and then going back out. And so, they're asking us for solutions to, maybe stay nimble. And, so there's definitely technology solutions where you can have the same look and feel in the office as you do in your home or remote mode. But, overall, I think they want us to, continue to be flexible as well. So, I think about contracts and, different relationships we maintain with them. And as their business needs change, we've got to be able to anticipate them. So they're just asking for partnership.
That's great. Yeah, agreed. Tony, what about you? What are you hearing about most?
Just continue to be a shortage of talent. That's probably the biggest thing. With that, the clients that we work with are looking for folks a lot of times with what we call modern technologies, and folks that are also what they call polyglots. So they have a lot of different, I think that means many forms. And so someone that can actually learn and ramp up on different technologies, because technology moves so fast. We're talking about pivoting here. Companies doing that a lot right now. So they might try some prototyping or proof of concept in one language, and then 3 months later just say, that didn't work, let's go to a different language that meets our needs. But I also think soft skills is really, really important. A lot of our clients just continue to emphasize that collaboration, being able to communicate and being able to really participate in conversations and not just be a fly on the wall, but to add to those conversations. Soft skills, definitely, because the technology changes so much. If you're an expert in something today, you won't be in 6 months. So it's probably, to me, what I've seen with clients, it's more important to be nimble and flexible from a tech perspective, and be able to kind of move to other technologies pretty quickly, and be open to that.
Yeah, for us, I mean, we have shown that the reasons why people want to come back to the office is for that exact reason, the soft piece of the world that we live in. So the collaboration, the relationships, the innovation that comes with being around your peers is critical. And it's the top 3 reasons of why folks do want to come back to the office. There's of course some benefits of being remote, where you have work-life balance better. You don't have to deal with traffic. There's, there are definitely some benefits to working from home, particularly on the heads down focus type work. But when it comes to creativity and developing new products and new processes and innovating, there's clearly a gap right now that we're all facing, and how to communicate well with our teams and how to advance the business. So it'll be interesting to see how we come out of this, for sure. And on that note, I mean, what do you see after the pandemic? Of course, I don't think we'll ever be completely gone, but what changes? Let's see, of all the changes, what do you see for the tech industry as a whole moving forward post-pandemic? Opportunities or threats? Tracy, you unmuted. Did you have anything to add to that?
I unmuted because my dog just came back from a walk and I but just repeat the question for me.
It was just, of all the changes we saw in 2020, what do you see for the technology industry as a whole, for opportunities as we come out of this, and or threats as we come out of this?
Yeah, I think that the opportunities certainly are that the technology industry overall has done a really good job of, of having that, casting that wider net and being more open to, to doing things differently. I think it's, it's going to be, how do you go from having, a lot of our tech clients have the kegs and the pool tables and pinball machines, and how do you go from that being at home and carrying through that culture? It's going to be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, agreed. Tony, Dan, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that the future is bright for tech careers, and so the pandemic has validated the high need for infrastructure folks and connectivity, and it's it's been kind of a validation, I guess. So I feel like there's just a lot of upside moving into the next era of pandemic and beyond. So I'm excited, actually.
Yeah,
tech is pretty solid. I think the threat I'm concerned about, it's somewhat germane and it's somewhat maybe not, and that is the real estate market in Portland and what that's doing, and how crazy that is right now. And if in a year, if employers start to say, yeah, we really want people in the office, then where will we find that talent? And we might have to import them, and then to import them, cost of living, real estate specifically, could be a threat.
Yeah, there's certainly, I mean, just from my perspective, being in the market, there's no shortage of space for sure right now. There's actually a massive surplus. We've had, since the pandemic, a 1.5 million square feet of sublease space put on the market. We're approaching a 20% vacancy overall downtown, and a lot of that space is new. I mean, we had a construction boom, so it's kind of a perfect storm for Portland. The suburbs are a much different story. No construction, steady demand, and this kind of new world where people want elbow room versus being, maybe in dense locations and dense apartments and whatnot. So it will be very interesting to see how we emerge out of this in Portland in particular. And we were talking before the call, there are some issues that we face downtown in Portland right now that are, far bigger than just the real estate dynamics. And so getting people back to work, I think from my perspective, is a really big part of that, and getting the working class downtown, eating at restaurants, vaccinated, and back to work. So I'm hopeful as well. I'm also, I think Dan mentioned just being optimistic on the technology sector. I am as well. I think that technology has penetrated every single industry and will continue to. There will be more opportunities that we don't even know about continuing to emerge. So I'm very optimistic about it. But with that, I'd love to turn it over to the audience. And this is a great question from Skip Newberry, and I'd love to ask this. If you could, or if you would like to, what would you like to see if you could see one thing that the state of Oregon could implement, one policy that would most positively impact the tech industry and Oregon competitiveness? What would you want to see?
Leave it to Skip to give us the easy question.
Yeah, Skip, that's a laydown. I know we're continually trying to expand the edge of the network, and I know our company specializes in rural and trying to take internet to underserved communities. So I think if there was anything from a state level, would be just to continue to support infrastructure investment and programs. I know we as a company do tap into federal assistance to expand the network as well. But that would probably be one area that I'd say just at a high level would serve all of us.
From a national perspective, not just from the state level, but the industry, what this has done in this past year, we're going to see some big changes. Like in 2010, when the Affordable Care Act hit, slated for next year would be transparency. So if you go to a provider and you want to know how much it costs for a knee surgery, they're going to have to tell you what the estimated cost is, and you'll get an explanation of benefits before your surgery that gives you the estimate about what the insurance carrier is going to actually charge you for it. So I see some positive regulatory changes coming out of what happened this last year, and then that in turn advanced technology and metrics and measuring quality of care, and taking those algorithms and really refining them to be able to advance medicine. So I'm really excited about that.
Well, my world's in talent acquisition. I'd say anything that has to do with job creation, job retraining, retraining people on different skills, whatever it would take to really help the market, especially the tech market, get more people into our industry. That would be kind of where I come from.
Yeah, my perspective is on keeping companies and keeping executives in Oregon. I would say that being sensitive to our tax system and where we stack up relative to our neighbors north, I guess north and east, probably not south, but people do have choices now, I think more than ever, on where to live and where to put their businesses. And I hope that message is not lost on the legislators and how taxes do impact where people choose to hire and live, and where the tax base comes from. So that would be my answer to that question. There's a question here from Samuel Newman. Samuel says, I recently read an article that articulated the cost to hire a mid-career software engineer at $30,000 plus or minus, while upskilling an internal employee into that role would be $20,000 or less. Keeping in mind the demand for technology talent, do you see clients successfully implementing career development programs through upskilling their current workforce to gain a competitive advantage around talent and benefit offerings? Very well put, Samuel. So anyone have an answer on that?
I think I touched on it earlier about, I mean, there is a company called Leg Up, and they're doing that advancement and coaching to be able to, you know, people want that career development, and you're right, that you'll be able to, you know, when someone has been in the job for a long time and they leave, oftentimes it costs a lot more to replace them. And why not just refine and give that employee the development, and then, you know, have them stay on a lot longer than may not happen otherwise.
Could you repeat the question again, Eric?
So the basis is it costs more to hire new than train existing. And are you seeing people implement career development programs to basically do that?
Gotcha. Not as much. I think not as much as I'd like to see, as far as Tracy kind of said, take your own and retool them or give them those opportunities to make a career change. Yeah, not near as much.
I know in our industry, there's certainly clear paths where people can get involved in the business and grow their careers for a long time. So if you get involved in our technical side of the business, there's some really clean steps, and you know, it requires that you invest in yourself, and we invest in employees too to upskill them. But certainly, I think it's on the employee to kind of meet us halfway on that, to, you know, bring their you know, their game up along their career as well.
Yeah, I've been, for my company, very pleased with the upward mobility, and our sort of tagline is achieve ambitions, and it's for clients, but it's also for employees. And it's, to your point, Dan, I think it's incumbent on the employee to sort of step up and want it and try to get it. And I think good companies recognize that ambition and meet them there, you know, or at least try to meet them there. So so Mark says, it says, having been in the tax software industry, supplying solutions to CPAs, Multnomah County is infamous for its tax regulations at a national level among CPAs and their clients. I'm not sure that was a question, so maybe it was tag on to this. What areas of technology assistance with Main Street businesses are most important to support digital relevance and improved online operations post-pandemic? I'm sorry, guys, I think I'm reading these in the wrong order. I should have gone from the top down to the bottom here. So I'll read it again here. What areas of technology assistance with Main Street businesses, retail, restaurants, local services are most important to support digital relevance and improved online operations resilience post-pandemic? Anyone have an answer for that? I'm not sure, so I don't know.
I kind of hear, and maybe I'm going to morph the question a little bit, but I kind of hear a consideration that we see for companies as they're working with remote work and remote workers is how do they enable them and, you know, not put all the burden on the employee. So, you know, if the companies have a strategy for paying for their internet, for example, you know, and I saw another question that came up around, is that tax deductible? And I'm not an accountant, but I would think if that's a business expense the company incurs as a part of this transition or this pivot, that certainly would be in scope.
Just to throw in around this, what we're trying to figure out with our small business development centers is really how to work with TAO, how to work with other providers in the state, whether to support a restaurant industry that's now recognizing the importance of online menu systems and integration with their point of sale equipment, to, you know, the retail establishments that were the favorite in town but didn't necessarily have as much online presence because of the uniqueness. You know, it's wide spanning from both merchandise as well as the operations and how to help these entrepreneurs implement the systems that they need to be relevant.
So opening back up to the audience here, I mean, feel free not to just do it in the chat, but are there things that you'd like to hear about from any of us, or just topics you'd like to bring up? What's on your mind? What brought you here to this event? And I'll just open it up to the floor. You know, I've heard you have to call on people, so I might call on you if you aren't speaking up. I know there's something on your minds.
So I know one question, this is Riley. One question I heard before the event was, you know, what are folks' estimates on when people will be back in an office? You know, whether that's 1 day a week or whether that's, you know, a consistent group coming in regular hours. What are you looking at from your perspective?
I can answer that just from our research. We've seen something to the effect of, I think, 74% who want to be at least working from home 1 to 2 days a week, and then the other days of the week they're in the office. So the vast majority is a hybrid work model. And then from a timing perspective, I've heard the earliest July of this year, and then but most likely Q3, Q4, people will really start getting back to the office.
Our company's had multiple dates when we were going to be coming back, and the goalpost keeps getting moved out. We've gone through a pretty extensive review internally about, you know, how are we equipped? What have we learned from the last year? You know, and it comes down to evaluating leadership skills and the ability to manage and cope with remote workers, to kind of rating our employees on their remote tolerance, and do we have the right, you know, process and infrastructure in place, not just technically, but just, you know, from an HR perspective. So it's an active conversation, and I think we all agree it's going to be a hybrid. It's not going to ever go back to BAU as we knew it.
Yeah,
We're very similar to Dan, that, you know, everybody wants the ability to have that option. And then I think that with this big shift, it really has changed mindset. I mean, how many people do we know that thought that if people were working from home, then they weren't going to work as hard? And what we find is that people work harder, and they want to prove that, you know, they're at home and they're getting their work done. And it's that harder line between home and office. And so I think that it will be hard to transition 100% back.
Yeah, Tracy, that's a great point. We've seen productivity increase throughout the pandemic. And so I think a lot of it has to do with just learning how to trust differently in your accountability models. And, you know, old school approach is not going to work in this new world.
Right.
I would say along those lines, Dan, that we have had almost every client say at the very least their productivity stayed the same, if not went up. And kind of like you said, the trust and the old school way of doing things, kind of, you know, be in the seat 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I really hope that that's a thing of the past, and that there again will be flexibility for employees, and employers will have that flexibility as well.
Well, one last question from Christopher. He says, when does office culture and perks look like they will return? Will break rooms be stocked with snacks? Will lunches be provided? Will happy hours happen? ? And my only comment on that is that employers are going to need to entice employees to come back with something. Why would you want to be there versus working from home? And so there's a real focus on well-being and on connectivity when we do come back to the office, and the spaces that we're using to foster that community and that culture and collaboration. So I think the answer is yes, and I really hope so, because I could sure use some more happy hours in my life with real people, not, you know, over the computer. So I think you will see that. It'll certainly have to come with a backdrop of ultimate safety, though. That is the other thing that we haven't really talked about, but employers are keenly aware of the safety impact, and how having their employees come back in a physical environment needs to be done very thoughtfully. So,
And to look within, right? And you don't just go after the squeaky wheel like Chris, who wants snacks, checking in with everybody and see what's most important.
Yeah. Well, we're at 12:30, so I just want to thank TAO for hosting this event and putting it on and bringing us together. And thanks to our panelists, Tony, Dan, and Tracy. You've been wonderful. And I look forward to the days when we get to have a real happy hour in person and cheers and, you know, enjoy the sunshine. So I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much,
Nice to
Eric
meet
and
you all.
Carolyn.
Yep. You guys
And
be
JL
safe.
on Facebook. Just for folks, for the few questions that didn't get answered that came through the chat, we will pitch those to panelists and we can post some answers on Mobilize. So panelists, we may throw you a few questions to weigh in on over email. And this has been such a great discussion. So thanks to everybody for taking the time today.
Thank
Thank
you.
Nice to
Happy
meet you
Friday.
all.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.